I was so ashamed going into the workforce 20 years ago to say I was dyslexic. Now I'm proud of it. You know, LinkedIn, where you're like, I'm amazing, look at me, there's no problems with life. I mean, that's just... There is no such thing as running a business and having work-life balance. It just doesn't exist. Give up your weekends, give up your life, give up seeing your friends, potentially having children. Those are the sacrifices you make. I always made a promise to myself, if I'm hating it more than I'm liking it, it's time to walk away.
Because I'm autistic, I think differently. And back in 2015, I wanted people to drink differently. So I created Seedlip, the world's first distilled non-alcoholic spirits. I took Seedlip from my kitchen to 35 countries and the world's best bars, restaurants, and retailers. And we did it in 3.5 years. It was wild. They're delicious, they're intriguing, they're these distilled botanical blends you can just mix with tonic or have in a cocktail. You really don't need another sickly, horrible mocktail. Check us out on seedlipdrinks.com or Amazon and let me know what you think. Our next guest is on a mission to kill LinkedIn. Pip Jamieson founded The Dots, an app praised by Apple as networking for the modern world. She grew The Dots to over 1 million members and has been recognised as one of the Sunday Times top 100 disruptive entrepreneurs. She also happens to be delightfully dyslexic. She is a force, and I loved this episode. Let's get into it. Let's see how great minds think differently. Pip Jamieson, people have named you all these amazing things. Top 100 disruptive entrepreneurs and trailblazing leaders. How does that feel?
Oh, good question. Oh, I mean, it's a complete honor, but just surreal as well. I just do what I do, right? And, you know, it's lovely to get recognition. I think you always have a bit of imposter syndrome, right? It's ridiculous. But I think what I've always cared more about is actually having a positive impact. So the awards I care most about is where it's around that positive impact. And so I think it's when I get awards where it's like literally, you know, I'm making a difference is the ones I care about.
Tell me a bit about that positive impact, because I know it is central to what you do and feels like it's in you.
Yeah, I think I've always been one of those people where negativity really bothers me and affects me and actually affects me mentally. And I see what happens online with social media and how awful it has become and how divisive it's become and how negative it is. And I just hate that. And so, you know, when I wanted to build a social platform, I wanted to create the absolute opposite, a safe space where people could get help and support. And so our algorithm's actually based on positivity and kindness.
Which I love. I mean, I something emotional like kindness and something very unemotional like an algorithm.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
We have a language model. So it basically recognizes language. So for example, whenever you use one of our products, so we have the Dots, but we also white label our app to loads of different businesses. Whenever you use one of our products, you can't use awful words. So it screens out awful words automatically from direct messaging, from any posts.
And is that not the norm?
No, it's not the norm at all, because it's not in the interests of social media companies not to have bad behavior, because they're fueled by advertising. They want people to be on their products more frequently. And so actually having divisive, horrible behavior is in their interest. You just have to look at Trump's impact on Twitter, X, and how everyone was addicted to it because of Trump. And so I'm really lucky that my business model isn't advertising. So I don't have to chase the addictive behavior. My business model is based on licensing my product to businesses who want to build really great communities. So all I really care about is adding value to those communities. And
so smart.
That's what I absolutely love. I'm not sure it's smart. It was more, I just couldn't get up every day if I wasn't doing that, if I was just making another negative, awful space.
But you're just chasing a different thing, aren't you? But it's not chasing a bad, detrimental, negative thing. and that fueling all of decisions and plans and budgets, etc., you're chasing something far more positive. But it sounds like you've been able to couch that in a business model that's also scalable, but in a different way.
Yeah. And I just classic founder, I've tried so many business models, but it was lovely to get to a point where my values and my business model completely align. And that's where the sort of magic happens. And then you just watch the communities and how they help and support each other. And that just makes me happier. It helps me get out of bed every day.
And so what have you learned? The Dots has been going 10 years. Yeah, 10 years.
10 years.
10 years.
Oh my God.
A decade.
I was young when I started it.
What have you learned about community?
What I've learned is communities actually exist in the real world. And I think there's this hilarious thing where we've all tried to digitize communities, but we have been part of communities since we were human, right? We have been part of our village and we've been part of our family. And, that has all existed in the real world. And really great communities are the ones that help and support and nurture each other. And it's the sum of everyone coming together is better than the individual. And I think we forgot that when it came to translating digital. It became very individualistic. Like, I hate LinkedIn. It's like, oh, brag, look at me. And there's no coming together and solving problems. And so I think I really just wanted to create a way that it augmented the real world experience. It didn't replace that. It just meant that it was a space where you could still meet in person. So all our communities have in real life events around those communities. But then between that, you could continue connecting. And so that's why I've leaned in very heavily into positivity, kindness, and real world experience.
Yeah. There is a stat that less than 40% of neurodivergent adults are in full-time employment, which is shocking.
Yeah.
How do we get more amazing, wonderful, different brains into the workplace?
I mean, it's very complex, but I think what I have definitely seen a sea change in over the last 10 years is that knowledge of companies of the value of neurodiversity. And that's been so incredibly exciting. Like when I was starting out 10 years ago, you'd say dyslexia, it was like a dirty word, and funny enough, sometimes that does still happen, but it's a rarity, right, in professional circumstances. So what I've loved is there is that recognition from businesses that, oh my God, it is a superpower. And so I think there has been this internal shift. But the problem is what hasn't caught up is the accommodation of neurodiversity within those businesses. So yes, we want neurodiverse talent, but we want them to operate like neurotypicals in the workplace. That hopefully is also starting to move as well, as people sort of realize that they're just churning through neurodiverse talent. I think also it is still a problem with education. My nephew is diagnosed with dyslexia recently. I mean, his aunt's dyslexic, my brother's dyslexic, and he was just not supported at school. He got really upset that he'd been diagnosed. And I was like, my God, is this still happening? I was diagnosed
85% of kids that are diagnosed dyslexic now are ashamed of it.
Yeah. And I was like, this is mad. And I was like, I was diagnosed in the 80s. I was so lucky. And obviously back then it was slightly different, but I thought things had changed. He's a genius. He's been designing a farm since he was 8 years old. But, I had to educate him myself. And I'm just thinking, how come the schools have still not caught up with this? So I think the ones that really are falling behind is just, you just don't have that confidence or the education. And I was so lucky because I got support when I was young. And if I hadn't got that support, would I be here? No.
And so what, therefore, do you say to one of the 85% of children who are diagnosed dyslexic and are upset about that?
I think with my nephew, because it was such a recent experience, I basically was quite honest with him and said, this is the worst bit, right? So this is the time where it is going to be hard because you're having to do things in a neurotypical way at school. But then I just educated him on the magic of dyslexia. And so it was a lot of sharing of brilliant people. There's such a bias in terms of different careers. Like if you're autistic, you have to be tech. And if you're dyslexic, you have to be creative, right? There is a correlation, but there's so many opportunities. And so, yeah, it was just the education of how magic your brain actually is. And that was, yeah, I think that's what I'd love to do for all children. But that's got to happen at a grassroots, at school level for everyone.
Yeah, it does. And I know the kind of ADHD stat, which is, we were informed about that kids who are diagnosed ADHD are exposed to 20,000 more negative messages than kids who aren't diagnosed ADHD. And so you kind of, you're starting from that place of it's a bad thing. It's a negative thing.
Yeah.
And it's something to hide, something to be ashamed of. My sense of moral justice just gets really poked by that, right? Of like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
That's not fair, and doesn't have to be that way.
Because I'm diagnosed dyslexic, but I do think maybe I am AD as well. And I haven't been reassessed, and I probably should do. But, it's interesting because I got kicked out of 2 schools. And I always thought AD was all about distraction, but you start hearing about the hyper-focus. So I'm not interested in what I'm not interested in, but when I am interested, I can't stop. But it really bothers me also that a lot of women are never, or girls are not being diagnosed with AD. If I was a boy and kicked out, I probably would have been diagnosed earlier. And so, and I was also speaking on a panel with a load of university students. They were talking about Ritalin. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing that with cigarettes and coffee. I don't recommend that for AD. Definitely do something else. But I just think we're not diagnosing early enough, and we're not supporting the ones that are diagnosed and understanding the negative impact that can have on their life forever.
When did you start thinking about ADHD?
It was definitely sitting on panels, and I had a huge bias of what it was. I really thought it was just you'd always be distracted, and I'm not. I'm hyper focused. So once I got over that bias of what it was that moment where I thought, yeah, okay, maybe. And really the reality is with neurodiversity, you tend to have one and something else. And actually online, there's this brilliant, it looks like a flower, and it shows the interlocking circles between different neurodiverse traits. That actually shows the strengths of the interlocking circles, and how actually if you're autistic and dyslexic, those strengths actually can be very different than if you're dyslexic and ADHD, for example. So I love that. That was one of the things I showed my nephew is you're magical because look at the strengths that come with what you do. And obviously with dyslexia, creativity is one of those, but if it interlocks with something else, it's magical.
What I like about lots of the more recent graphs or charts that I've seen about neurodiversity is, I have this big bugbear about being on the spectrum and this being a linear rectangle instead of being in the spectrum and the spectrum being a circle. And we talked before we started recording about how much I love circles and dots. I mean, if you're watching, you can see that. But there is so much of this. I mean, it's a dreadful word, isn't it? Comorbidity. I mean, who the thought of that word to just describe that you might not just be ADHD or dyslexic. Let's talk about creativity. What does it mean to you?
I think it's just problem solving, right? It's seeing things differently and finding solutions to those problems. Now, I think what I hate about the word, if I'm honest, is everyone thinks creativity design, right? And actually it's so much broader. I mean, as humans, we are creative by our nature. That's what sets us apart. We have designed and built and created the world around us in a way that no other species has. And so, yeah, for me, creativity is around problem solving and finding different ways of seeing the world. And so I think that's why it correlates so much with neurodiversity and the way our brains work. And so, yeah, I feel like the amount of people I meet and they go, oh, I'm not creative. I'm like, everyone is creative.
Why is that? Why do people say, I'm not creative.
I think it's because they went to a drawing class when they were about 5 and got told they couldn't draw, and suddenly it was like, I'm not creative. But everyone's creative. Like, everything we do every day is creative. And we're just lucky when we're neurodiverse to be more creative.
Why do you think there is this really strong link between dyslexia and creativity?
I think it's back to what I was saying, where we're just taking in more data and we're taking in more information and we're synthesizing, and our brains are kind of engineered in a way that can really quickly connect dots. We're both obsessed with dots, which is hilarious. So, it's, creativity is a, problem solving, but envisaging a new way. And if we're able to see the outsides of things, then it's so much easier for us to connect dots.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why we're all obsessed with dots, because our brains are just dots running around, just connecting with each other.
It's wonderful. I remember before Seedlip, working in the design world, and this sounds so obvious, but my boss at the time saying to me that, look, if you go to the same things as everybody goes to, you read the same magazines as everybody reads, you look at the same things, then guess what? You're going to get the same results. Yeah. The way to get good ideas is this: expose yourself to as many weird and wonderful things as possible. Sounds really simple, but I think we're geared up as a world to not really do that.
Also, as neurodiverse individuals, we retain that information more as well. So we get obsessed with things, really interested in it, and we store that information. So I did economics at uni. I find that suddenly that will pop into my brain now, and that was 20 years ago, but it was all of this is stored together to connect things later on. And so all of those different lived experiences can come together, but we retain that information to be able to connect it later down the track, which is kind of magical.
How do you therefore inspire your team and I guess the DOTS community, A, with the fact that you are dyslexic, and B, with just wanting people to be more creative?
So, I mean, with the dyslexia, actually, it was I used to keep it hidden, and then I put that email signature on. And actually, what was magical about that with my team is everyone then just felt more comfortable about talking about their differences and whatever guise it was. And so, suddenly I found out members of my team had autism or depression, or and it was just this lovely environment where we were all a lot more open. And I've just been so careful to screen for making sure that people join the business are open to everyone else's differences and are all different. And so I think I was saying earlier when we were chatting, like I got this awful review on Glassdoor and it broke my heart, where we interviewed someone and this guy was like, oh, the founder was really unconfident. She was talking about her dyslexia in the interview, and wouldn't go there if I was you, wouldn't work at that company. And I was like, well, this is the exact point. Like, we were screening for empathy for people's difference, so we made the right choice. But you're like, God, do people really think like this? So I think with inspiring my team, I think it's just leading by example. I just am very open about where I have challenges, and I am very open about where I need support. And it just means everyone is the same, which leads to this lovely collaborative environment. I also have absolute zero tolerance for politics, and I will always root out bad apples. It just is anyone who's the blame game. We all make mistakes. It just doesn't work. And so I think putting those together inspires the team. In terms of creativity, I just love having a team that's focused on solutions, not problems. And we scream from that at the beginning. But I also love setting problems that we work on together. So instead of me going, this is how we're going to solve this, we'll come together as a group. This is the challenge. I'm thinking maybe this way, and actually coming together and everyone sort of working on that problem together.
So collaborative.
I think that's the brilliant thing about being dyslexic, because I've always had to be collaborative because I can't do it. I've always had to have help, right? And so it means I'm just definitely open to everyone coming together, because I right from an early age, I knew I couldn't do everything brilliantly. I knew I needed support in certain areas, and everyone does.
But I presume that what then emanates from your team out into the community is exactly that. I know you have an incredibly diverse community with the DOTS that you are I know you're incredibly proud of because you worked really hard on it. Can you just tell us about that?
The other thing that bothered me about social media was how homogenous it had become, especially 10 years ago. And especially when it came to professional environments like LinkedIn. It was like, if I was not a kind of homogenous suited white corporate, I wasn't going to succeed. And so I really did a lot of work in those early days to make it a safe space for everyone to flourish, because the best creative ideas come from different backgrounds, if we all are the same, we're all going to think exactly the same. So, 68% of our community are women, identify as women, 38% of our community is ethnic minority, 16% LGBT plus. And we do a lot of work, obviously, supporting neurodiverse talent. But with that all coming together, it's just because we created a safe space. And actually, that sounds incredibly simple. It's quite hard to do, but by creating that safe space, it was a place that everyone could be themselves. I've always led again by example, being able to be open in my posts so other people feel like, I don't think if we have a problem, we should share that problem and ask. And actually during COVID, it broke my heart. Like, there were so many people that were being let go, but people were very willing to ask for help. I've just been let go. I'm struggling with mental health. How do I overcome it? And that's the space I want to be, not, LinkedIn, where you're like, I'm amazing. Look at me. There's no problems with life. I mean, that's just like,
not real.
And what's lovely is then that technology then being translated to all the other white labels we now do, where there's safe spaces for members to connect and help each other.
Why do you think that these amazing other organizations are then going, hey, I want a bit of the dots?
I mean, we spent years developing the technology for our own community, and we're over 1 million members now, and that's been magical to watch. But it wasn't easy. We actually started as a platform that was profiles and jobs. And then what I realized is that no one really was getting a job through applying for a traditional job. So it was a really depressing experience for my community, because they were applying for a job, no one was getting back to them. Really depressing, especially if you're neurodiverse. That's really an anxious time when no one's getting back to you. And so what I realized is actually community is where a lot of people are getting the work, meeting someone in the real world and building their career that way. And so somewhat naively, like 7 years ago, we were like, let's build a community platform. That's going to be easy. I came to realize why there's about 5 community platforms in the world. The features are the easy bit. How to make sure the relevant thing get to the relevant people is the more important bit. We then started getting approached by other brands who had either tried to build it themselves or had licensed it, and people weren't coming back regularly. And so the first person that approached me was Nick Jones, who's the founder of Soho House, Dyslexic legend as well, which is amazing. And he was like, I love the Dots platform. We're launching the Soho Works, which is the works community for Soho House. Will you license the tech? And that was the beginning of the journey. We're over 35 products now. But I just love it. You get these brilliant communities, but all of them I've sort of done a Trojan horse. I've gone in and made sure they're all positive. I'm not sure the businesses we work with really care that much. Not that they're bad businesses, but what they care about is having an app people regularly come back to and makes them money, right? Yeah. Which is business. But within that, I've Trojan horsed positivity, kindness, which also helps them as well, because they're just lovely. It's a much easier community to manage like that as well. And that's
but it's a brilliant way to scale a message. I really admire that. I think it's really great, Pip. Let's talk a bit more about your personal life, Pip. You told me when we spoke what your sister calls you.
Sorry.
It made me laugh.
So my amazing sister calls me a high-end gypsy, and she's completely right, and I'm very proud of that term. And I love gypsies, by the way. So me and my husband have always just kind of lived differently. I guess my brain's different and I live differently as well. So we've been living on a houseboat for 10 years now, Amazing. Which has been the most magical thing. Definitely the cheapest way to live in central London as well. So just before COVID, I wanted to take the Dots carbon neutral. And my husband is an environmental consultant. And so he went, well, why don't we buy a wood? And who knew there is a Zoopla for woodlands called woodland.com, and there's a forest.com or co.uk. So we end up buying a wood in East Sussex. So we have a wood that we're regenerating. And then we also recently got a little cottage in Kent on a floodplain, which is probably not the wisest move. But you get by the way, you get doubles the size of the house for half the price, which I'll probably regret in 20 years when it's underwater. But I have a medieval bridge in my garden, and we have a kayak, and we paddle boards, and just can be out with nature. So I guess, my life is this weird sort of camping, houseboating, tech that, I think that's it. I needed an antithesis to tech. I'm surrounded by people that are just talking about the future of tech and how robots and machine learning is going to take over the world. And I need that antithesis to go, actually, the most sophisticated things that exist is nature. And I mean, great, we're developing all these things and they can be solutions to problems. But then you have things like trees that have evolved over billions of years that are so much more sophisticated than anything we're ever going to develop. And we forget how important nature is. I mean, penicillin is a fungi. It is nature. The most important medical discovery was nature.
I absolutely adore nature. I'm happiest outside. I don't really like cities. How important is neurodiversity for the future of this planet?
I think we're the ones that come up with the best solutions, aren't we? Oh God, that's so biased. Yeah, I think, it is neurodiverse brains that can help find those solutions. And some of those solutions can be technology, but actually some of it can be, let's just trust in nature to help us get back to where we should be. And I think neurodiversity, when it comes to the human solutions, that will be led by neurodiverse thinkers.
Yeah, it's that same old thing, isn't it? Of you do the same things and expect different results, and it doesn't happen. There is an element of doing things differently going forwards that's needed. I guess my outside in sort of looking at what's having only known about the word neurodiversity for 2 years, is we just need to get the balance of informing and educating, catching up the 80%, so that we're a bit more all on the same playing field.
Yeah.
And there isn't misdiagnosis, and there aren't big waiting lists, and it's not all negative.
Yeah.
And we can get back to, it's just like a boat that's sort of sitting nicely in the water.
Yeah.
And maybe that's completely naive and rose-tinted and deluded, but I think that's what we need to do.
But if you look at the changes since I was diagnosed in the 80s to now, it is moving, sometimes not fast enough. But
what tells you that? What tells you that?
I think it's the perception. I was so ashamed going into the workforce 20 years ago to say I was dyslexic. Now I'm proud of it. And yes, it's not moving necessarily fast enough, but I think it is changing. So I had a really interesting thing. So madly, I have recently joined the parish council of my village. Which is the craziest thing I've ever done. The reason I did that is I live in a floodplain, and I am obsessed by the fact that we have so much potential for, say, hydropower in our village. I had to go into this little leaflet, and like a little promotion leaflet, and that went out to everyone. And I put that I was dyslexic. And what was amazing is when I got nominated, I was at this village hall, and I had all these elderly women, because they were all elderly, that came to the parish council meeting, who said, thank you, because I have dyslexia and I've never been able to talk about it. And these women are in their 50s, 60s. And so you realize then how much it has moved. Yes, that feels like a very short time span, but actually that's not. In the whole planet history, that's not. So for these women, they could never talk about it. My grandma never learned to read and was obviously dyslexic, but never was diagnosed. So we think about time in human times, but maybe we should start thinking more like trees that live to 1,000 years. If you look at it that way, it is moving faster.
Yeah, and my grandfather was dyslexic, and we used to make fun of it.
Yeah.
I'm only going back 20, 30 years, not 100 years.
Yeah.
So what if you can't f***ing spell? Really
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, and with technology now, there's so much support for writing emails and punctuation, even though I still get it completely wrong.
Yeah, but do we need handwriting?
No. So true. Yeah.
Do we actually need it?
No, I think that where I'm most excited about AI is when the thing starts writing emails for me. That is just the bit I can't wait. I mean, we're pretty much there, but
Yeah.
Do we need it?
Yeah. Do we need handwriting? And does your intelligence need to be solely judged on your ability to spell and handwrite?
Saying that, I really mucked up once. So when I was working for the government.
Okay. Keep going.
So after uni, I worked for the Fast Road Civil Service, and I was an economic assistant to David Blunkett, who was the Labour leader in the Home Office. And I used to do his economic reports every week. And I basically read, one of the lines was, we've definitely got to eradicate all problematic drug users. But I accidentally misspelled eradicate and I spelt it irradiate. So it went up to the politician that we need to irradiate all the problematic drug users. And I got this lovely note. And David Blanca was amazing because he was blind and like he used to have everything translated into Braille. And I got this lovely note back saying, Pip, I don't think you meant irradiate. And I was like, could you imagine? Well, the clangor was when I graduated uni, which no one ever thought. I was first gen to go to uni. No one ever thought I'd graduate uni. And I emailed my dad and I said, I told you I was a genius. And I misspelled genius. And I spelled it Guinness. And so... yeah, he still has that email and it's framed in our toilet.
Told you I'm a Guinness.
I told you I was a Guinness. I'm an Irish beer.
What do your friends say about you, Pip?
I'd say they say I'm driven, very kind, always there when they need me, but maybe not around as much as they want me. So yeah, I would say that was how they described me. I think that's the problem with running a business, though. You're not as around for your friends as much.
What else have you sacrificed?
Children. So we don't have kids. We have 9 godchildren, which is amazing. I have frozen embryos. So I have these frozen embryos in a bank somewhere, but I think we're probably not going to. So yeah, it's tough, right? Because you have to make these decisions.
Yeah, people don't talk like, I think people only talk in the hindsight, obviously, on sacrifices rather than the maybe deliberate sacrifices where you actually make a decision and kind of go, I'm going to not do that or not be able to do that. You know, I didn't see my family much during the kind of CLIP years, and that wasn't a deliberate decision. It just had to be.
Yeah.
To kind of do what I wanted to do. But I don't think on reflection, or on reflection, I probably could have said to my family, I don't think I'm going to be around much. You do have to make these sacrifices. And
I think that's what, like I mentor a lot of founders now. And I think that's what you need to decide with what you want to do with your life. I think there's this brilliant, like, you know, it's the kind of Instagram way of what a founder is total. Like it is so hard, right? And if you really need to think about what you want from your life and is this the right path for you? And you sacrifice so much and so many hours. There is no such thing as running a business and having work-life balance. It just doesn't exist. I mean, sorry, on a smaller scale, yes, if it's more of a, but if you want to drive a big business through. And so everyone's like, I want to build this big business. And you're like, why? Is the most important question you have to ask yourself. Because give up your weekends, give up your life, give up seeing your friends, potentially having children. Those are the sacrifices you make. I would not want to put anyone off. It's been the most incredible journey and I would not give it up for the world. But it has been right for me. It is not right for everyone. But I always made a promise to myself, if I'm hating it more than I'm liking it, it's time to walk away. And so I think you've got to go the path you want to.
We asked you to bring something that represents your brain, Pip. Oh. I love your brain, Pip. I love your brain, and I've loved hearing about your brain. And I'm quite visual, so I feel like I've seen your brain, which is really cool.
Lots of dots.
We got lots of dots. What have you brought?
So, I have brought a piece of wood from the wood that we're regenerating in East Sussex. And the reason I brought it is I have become totally obsessed with trees. And also I think the way they work is kind of a bit how my brain works. So why do I love trees? I mean, there's the obvious things. They create life, it's oxygen, fine. But what I then increasingly got obsessed with is the worldwide wood. And this is essentially how trees communicate through their root systems and through mycelium and mushrooms underground. And what I love about tree communication is it's so positive. So what you might not know is that trees are mother trees. Those mother trees feed young trees under the ground. So if a young tree hasn't had enough water, they'll send water and nutrients to the young trees. If a tree is getting attacked, they will let other trees know through the neural networks underground. And they just are kind and collaborative, where they look as a collective to support each other. And that's what I kind of see the world as, the technology I'm building as. So for me, they are the most evolved species. And it reminds me every day that it doesn't matter what we build, those trees have built something more special.
I share your love of trees, and I like hugging trees.
Yeah,
I
me
get
too.
the kids to hug trees and they love it. And maybe they don't love it, actually. I don't know, but they probably think that is weird, but that's okay. I think it's amazing that you've literally got two communities. One is, lives on the World Wide Web, and the other one is the kind of this community of amazing specimens called trees.
We've, with the wood that we're regenerating, I've planted hundreds and hundreds of trees now. And, the fact that has all started linking up and seeing them grow, and this has been over 4 years. But the fact that these will be around now for hundreds, hopefully thousands of years, I just think actually that's the most valuable thing I'm going to leave behind, actually. Leaving this ecosystem behind. It just makes me so incredible. They are my children.
Thank you so much, Pip, for coming on. I feel like I've had a treat today. I really feel like spending time with you and hearing you and you being yourself and being able to kind of hear and witness that is a really cool thing.
Thank you for having me.